House of Representatives and the Senate,
I am the Senate.
Congress, make up an entire branch of a three-branch system: executive, judicial, and legislative. And their pivotal process in the way laws are passed in this country. The legislative process can begin in one of two ways. A representative can introduce the bill or sponsor, and then it can be assigned to a certain committee to be studied. If it's scheduled to be voted on, it's voted on. If it passes by a majority, it goes to the Senate. Similar process there, committee studies it. If that passes, it will go to the House and Senate to be revised, and then it'll go to the president, who can sign it into law or veto it. If a senator introduces the bill, it's very similar process. Committees studied, voted, and then to the House, same process to the president, etc.
I love democracy.
The House brings more legislators to the table at 435. That's based on districts, compared to the Senate's 100, 2 for each state. Representatives are determined by state and the amount of people in that state. Like New York City has multiple representatives, whereas Wyoming has 1. Each state is guaranteed at least 1 representative, but each state also, it's guaranteed 2 senators. And in theory, if a bill is passed in the House, it should be passed in the Senate because of the larger sample size. Representatives are up for election every 2 years, as opposed to senators 6. Representatives have to keep their constituents happy because they're up for re-election so much. But senators can more effectively take advantage of long-term plans because they probably won't be voted out while that plan is taking place, because they can execute it over a 6-year period. The Senate is more influential than the House of Representatives in the legislative process because of the Senate's prestige and more deliberate legislative views.
Time for Anakin! I have the high ground! You underestimate my power!
George Washington was quoted on the Senate's website explaining to Thomas Jefferson that the Senate was intended to cool legislation passed by the House, quote-unquote, just as a saucer is used to cool hot tea. That's a reason why so many bills die in the Senate. The Senate is intended to be more deliberate. It's intended to poke holes in bills in a more effective manner than the House does. Because even after bills pass in the House, it's more than likely going to die in the Senate, about 68% chance from 2009 to 2020. After it passes the legislative branch and goes to the executive branch, it's very likely to be made into law. There are only a few that have not been made into law. The entire legislative process is extremely important and comprehensive to ensure that the proposed law is suitable for the country. It's important that enough people review the law to poke holes in it and make it as best as possible in a timely manner. The Senate seems to have the biggest influence on the bill because when it passes in the Senate, it's very likely to be made into law, whether introduced or as the second chamber. In terms of being elected, it's much harder to be elected as a senator than as a representative. There are only 100 senators, whereas there are 435 representatives. And while running for House, one can appeal to their audience or district. Senators have to, appeal to the entire state. But it is harder to remain elected as a representative because they're up for re-election every 2 years as opposed to senators 6.
Anakin, our allegiance is to the Senate.
19 representatives have become president compared to 17 senators that have won the presidency, but only 9 of those representatives did not also become senator. And another thing to consider is the requirements to be able to run for senator versus representative. Run for representative, you have to be at least 25 years old, a U.S. citizen of at least 7 years, and an inhabitant of the state that you're looking to represent. Requirements are a little more demanding for senator. One has to be at least 30 years of age, a U.S. citizen for 9 years, and living in a state that they would like to represent. The fact that it takes longer to be qualified to run for senator than it does to run for representative feeds into the fact that the Senate is more prestigious, and the government knows that. 11 years worth of bills were examined to find out how often a bill would pass after passing the Senate while introduced in the House, and how often a bill was passed into law after being introduced and passed in the Senate. in the Senate. 10.3% of bills introduced in the House were passed in the House, compared to 5.12% of bills introduced in the Senate being passed that were introduced in the Senate and passed in the Senate. And of the bills introduced and passed in the House, only 32.4% were passed in the Senate. And for bills introduced in the Senate and passed, 53.6% of those passed in the House. So when bills were introduced in the Senate, there was a 21.2% increase in the chances of a bill being passed in the second chamber if that bill passed in the Senate. To conclude, these quantitative statistics help paint a picture of the influence on bills that the Senate has. Once a bill passes through the Senate, it's much more likely to turn into law, as seen through the examined figures. The Senate is the biggest obstacle for a bill to pass, as it is a section of the legislative process where it is by far the most likely to be voted down. The Senate is a more influential branch of government than the House of Representatives in the lawmaking process. It's the biggest wall for a bill. It's twice as likely to be voted down when it's introduced in the Senate as opposed to being introduced in the House, a bill that is. Second chamber is a similar situation. That's for good reason, though. It's because the Senate was intended to be tougher on possible bills and poke holes in it more than the House would, to make sure that the laws were suitable for the country. So, yeah, thanks.
I don't like sand.